you and I are friends. I'm a fan of your work. You've become a bit of a rabble rouser, which I certainly appreciate. Tell me about this conference you just came from.
So we just came from the Stanford conference where they had pretty much the top scientists in the world who criticized the COVID policy. We had like Jay Bhattacharya, Marty Makary. We also had John Ioannidis, who's the most cited biomedical scientist in the world, maybe the greatest biomedical scientist of our generation. Anders Tegnell, who ran the Swedish COVID response. It was controversial worldwide, but in Sweden, it was extremely popular. And there's reasons why it was so popular, but it was very different from what everybody else did. And despite having basically the leaders from all these institutions, Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, et cetera, it was still, widely panned, sort of, I'd say the left-wing media. They didn't address the scientific issues. They just kind of smeared it, even though these are very preeminent and accomplished people who are just talking about the science. We had a lot of debate. We tried to get, as far as I understand, they tried to get a lot of people who had opposing opinions at Stanford to attend. A lot of people didn't want to. They had a hard time doing that because it's still kind of taboo to talk about for some reason. Even though, behind the scenes, if you talk to people privately, some of the best leaders in public health, they all kind of agree on the essentials of what went wrong during the pandemic response, but you're not allowed to have conferences about it. You're not allowed to talk about it in public. And it's a really weird situation.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
I experienced like a little bit of that recently when I got to speak at the Senate on chronic disease and nutrition in America, and it was a nonpartisan panel, roundtable discussion. It was led by Senator Ron Johnson, who is a Republican, but the panel itself was nonpartisan, and it got maligned by the mainstream, whatever the handful of mainstream media outlets that decided to cover it, maligned it as a partisan effort, which it wasn't.
Well, anything that's run by Republicans is a partisan effort. Anything that's run by Democrats is science, as we both know, right? That's kind of how the narrative is in the media, because basically all journalists are either Democrats or if they're independent, they're on the left. And there's something like, in the 1980s, something like 20% of journalists were Republican. Now it's like 3 or 4% are Republican. There's been a sweep, an overwhelming ideological sweep among journalists towards the left. And I think it's a real shame because you don't have the viewpoint diversity that we should be having. And you get this kind of groupthink that causes them to think that things that they disagree with are partisan or wrong. And of course, everything that they disagree with is going to be whatever doesn't agree, whatever is not on their sort of political presuppositions. It's a really sad situation that we have in our sort of media and institutions right now, I think.
Why has science seemingly become so politicized as of late?
I think it's been something that has been happening. There's been a secular trend since the 1950s. It used to be in the 1950s, it was between maybe 2 to 1 and maybe sometimes even 1 to 1, depending on what survey you were looking at, in terms of Republican or Democrats to Republicans in science and in academia. So in any department, maybe you'd have 2 Democrats, 1. So it's about a third Republican, 2/3 Democrat, maybe even half and half. And then progressively up to the 90s, it ended up being like 1 to 5 Republicans to Democrats. And then you had a massive sweep of, I think starting, I want to say like 2005 or so. Now it's like something like 16 to 1 or almost 20 to 1 ratio of people who identify as left-leaning and compared to people who are more conservative. If you look at Harvard, there's essentially nobody who's very conservative. There's a very small number of the Harvard faculty, maybe like a couple percent, who are Republicans. So at elite institutions is even worse. And it's just been a thing that's been going on for a while, and it's just gotten really, really bad recently. There's been sort of like an overall ideological takeover. One of the people who talks about this a lot is Chris Rufo. He talks about, it's called the March Through the Institutions, and that's a phrase from, I think, Rudy Duchka. He was a student of this basically Marxist intellectual from the 20th century named Herbert Marcuse. Their plan was to march through the institutions, take over the institutions. By taking over the institutions, then they could sort of take over the culture, and which is essentially what they've done. Now, I'm not saying that it's sort of a Marxist thing that has been accomplished. That's sort of a phrase that's applied to it that's sort of been used to characterize what's happened by some people on the right. But however you think has happened, the institutions have turned overwhelmingly left, and it is quite scary. Now with Trump, especially in 2016, getting elected, there was kind of a next level of hysteria that happened in response, and I think that more conservatives than ever before have been pushed out and marginalized in academia, and I think it's a really sad thing. It's been this politicization in response to Trump, but I think Trump himself being elected and being so popular is kind of a sign, not necessarily the cause, but kind of a sign of these processes that have been going on. Sort of this. I didn't know we were going to get so far into politics.
We don't have to. We don't have to stay there. But it's just, do you think there's something about academia that attracts a certain like political archetype? Like, what is it about academia that seems to attract a certain political leaning?
I'm going to sound really dismissive now, and it's because I feel really dismissive. If you're in academia, you're not doing things in the world. You're doing things in your head and in like research and stuff. And I think one of the, I don't know about you, but whenever I was young, I was very idealistic. I still am very idealistic, but whenever you're really young, you think, why can't we just do X, Y, and Z and sort of solve all the problems? Why can't we just like feed everybody, just give everybody stuff, make sure that everybody like, make sure the world's a place of peace and nobody's hurting. And why can't we just do that? All we have to do is just like give, the poor people the money, and we could just provide for everybody like that. And you have these very, the world doesn't work that way. You can't just do whatever is in your mind to then, do that to the world. It's actually much more complicated than that. It turns out, for example, the reason that we have, I'm talking a lot, so interrupt me anytime you want. The reason that we have, the system that we have is because of capitalism, right? That's why we have so much wealth. And that's quite different from this idea of like, have this ideal that I'm just going to like impose on society. Rather, we gave everybody the freedom to do the things that they want. It's very different from what you'd imagine to build sort of this great amount of prosperity. And yet we've built this. So I think that in people who don't build things and do things in the world, don't understand the limits of many of these sort of basic, almost childish ideals. I think academia is kind of a prolonged adolescence, and
they call it the ivory tower.
Ivory
right?
tower,
yeah.
Yes, and it happens in all countries. All countries move more left over time. All developed countries in academia as well, because I think it's the ivory tower that protects people from maturing and realizing that the world's a lot more complicated. I think intelligent people on the right realize that the world is complicated, understand that at a deep level, and understand sometimes the things that you think you wish you could just like make the world be a certain way. In order to make things closer to that way, you actually have to do it in ways that are a little bit more counterintuitive, and people who live in the real world understand that. I think.
Yeah, I get it. Watching your trajectory from afar has been super interesting. I mean, we became friends when you were talking about primarily nutrition. You were calling out nutrition misinformation, and then you got deeply involved in, the policy surrounding a certain pandemic that transpired a couple of years ago. So I think yeah, your journey has been super interesting. But I guess like, how would you describe your why? Like, what when you get out of bed in the morning, like what excites you about the work that you do?
That's a really interesting question. I love ideas, and I love challenging my own ideas, and I love growing and evolving and understanding the world at a deeper level. And I don't like things being easy. Because if they're easy, it's not as fun. If it's hard and you're going up against resistance, and you're pushing yourself, then life is a lot more interesting. There's more of a story there. And so I think to me, I'm just trying to develop and grow and become a better thinker, a better scientist. And so that actually explains a lot, I think, of why this has been such an interesting trajectory for me. I could have, as we may talk about, I could have just like, not said anything about the pandemic, I'd still be a medical student. I would have this MD and this PhD, but I've also always wanted to. The world has always bothered me a little bit because it could be better. In that sense, I'm a lot like many academics are. And so I've always, because it's bothered me so much, I've always wanted to express my opinions about why it should be better. And I feel like that's such an important part of my life, and that's led me to sort of the situation that I'm in now.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. I mean, I didn't choose the academic path as you have, but when my mom became sick and when I saw the standard of care for conditions like dementia, Parkinson's disease, and the fact that nobody was talking about these conditions from the standpoint of prevention, I felt called to change that, to get people talking about it. And so I can relate to that plight, you know?
Yeah. My only regret right now is that you have like this really awesome radio voice and I sound like Ben Shapiro. And I'm really trying to do better about that. But
you sound great, man. You're I love the way that your brain works. It's just so fast.
Yeah. The things that we see that are in the world that trouble us, we're trying to, I know that you're from a Jewish background. I know that a lot of that culturally and religiously is this idea of healing the world, of sort of bringing together some of the rifts in the world. And I feel like that's an inherent human instinct. But some people have that drive a little bit more than others. And I think that in your case, your personal experience has really shaped that. And that's also been the case for me as well. So.
Yeah. I feel like, before we started rolling, you were saying that you've, I was telling you that you've played a really important role in how I communicate science and nutrition. Because before we were friends, you were calling out a lot of the misinformation in the world of nutrition, which is not something that, I feel like you haven't done that in some time, but
I'm doing it in the COVID world now.
In the COVID world, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I credit you and others in the space from the academic side for really calling for greater nuance and to be able to have conversations. It's inspired me to want to have conversations that I don't necessarily with people that I don't necessarily agree with on every point. But I think that's how progress is made. And obviously you're now doing it in a different realm, but I think it's important nonetheless, and it's something that I feel really strongly needs to continue. Well, shouldn't be pushed to the margins and shouldn't be politicized. Right.
I think that in order to develop and grow as people and as a society, we need to have an open discussion about things. What's remarkable about you is that you, even though I remember some of the videos and stuff that I made, like criticizing some of your content, I was very surprised how you would respond to that. Instead of responding defensively, you actually like reached out and you were trying to learn more and you acknowledged the things that I might have said, that's right, I wasn't right about everything, but like you were always open to things, and you've done a truly remarkable job of I've seen you develop over the last, 4 or 5 years. Maybe it's been a little bit longer than that. Not only are you providing that nuance, but you're providing it to a large audience. And I just want to commend you at how unusual you are for both combining the popular message that you're putting out, along with you're always growing as somebody who's thinking about nutrition. I just think you're just doing an extraordinary job. You recently sent me a clip about seed oils, and I think your explanation of that is extraordinary. You don't buy into dogmas. You really are science-based. And I know that we're patting each other on the back this whole thing, but I think it's been incredible what you've been doing. I'm just very impressed.
Oh, dude, thank you. That means so much. Yeah, I think these are important conversations, and I think dogma doesn't help anybody, but it's important to sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if you're not having these conversations, we've been wrong so many times in the past, and we continue to see where there are instances of there's instances of fraud, outright lies, even from within the halls of academia. I mean, I don't know how much time you spend on Retraction Watch. I don't spend that much time on Retraction Watch, but there was a study posted recently, or a blog at least posted recently, that found that 1 in 7 scientific papers have some degree of fraud within them. And, I'm particularly passionate about Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and we see regularly that there's fraud within those fields. And it's to me, it just continues to foment suffering and misplaced hope, and I think that's really sad, because I had a loved one suffer from related conditions. So yeah, I don't think anything should be off limits. Like, even if it's quote unquote the science.
The science is not the science; it is pseudoscience. But science is about questioning, right? Trust the science is like an anti-scientific statement.
100%.
We get better. Science becomes better through nobody should ever. This is how you should do science, in my opinion. You should try to find an idea that you're really excited about. You're like, this can explain the world. And then you're like really excited. Like, how do I advance this project? And then you say, how am I wrong? Advancing that project in a large part is trying to find the ways that you're wrong. And you're going to be more wrong than right, I think. But a lot of people think that science is about showing and proving things. To some extent, it is, but you show and prove things by criticizing until whatever you have left is unassailable. And I think people think that we can kind of skirt around that process or not do that process. And I think as a result, we end up with this research fraud that you're talking about. People are trying to get grants in academia. I think it's more than 1 in 7, is, in my opinion. I think that's like just scratching the surface. I did a PhD recently. Research fraud, cutting corners, bad methodology. It goes deeper than just fraud, outright fraud. It's everywhere. And part of the reason is because that science is so competitive. There's too many PhDs being produced. And the reason is that the more PhDs you produce, the more basically cheap labor the professors can have.
Wow.
And as a result, but that cheap labor ends up being the professors themselves. And suddenly you have all that cheap labor that turns into professors, and they're all competing, and they all need so there's too many people competing for a really small pool of funding. And as a result, you end up with people who are using politics to get ahead. That becomes a big part of it. A lot of the politics that are going on in the universities are basically people leveraging sort of political fads in order to advance their careers. And you have a lot of corner cutting in making these publications. And we are losing the spirit of science in science, but also not just in science, but also in the media. Our whole culture, despite all the praises that we sing of science, I think is becoming in so many ways fundamentally anti-science, and it's a catastrophe for our civilization. So we need to find some way back to open discourse and back to rigorous and serious thinking about the way that science works.
It's interesting. Yeah, Eric Weinstein was talking about that on Rogan recently, about the fact that there's just a finite amount of research funding, and so you've got all these PhDs that are like, yeah, it's
and the people who get that funding, this is the other dark side of things, are often like the most ruthless, and they tend to be, I'm allowed to say this, I'm not allowed, they tend to be like kind of personality disordered. There's a lot of like people with personality disorders in academia. If you're kind of a narcissist, let's just use that word, you can be very okay, you really care about what other people think, right? And really caring about what other people think can be an asset to getting some of this limited funding, because if that's your overwhelming impulse, is to be concerned about what other people think, get this status and stuff, you're more willing to cut those corners. Whereas if you're just a normal person with like very smart and you're really focused on integrity, you can actually, as a result, not be able to advance in your career in science and not get the grant funding that you need to get. It's almost like scientific institutions are selecting for pathological people. It's not almost as if it is, they are selecting for pathological people. And science is therefore becoming pathological because of that fact. And I mean that 100%. I'm not making anything up. I'm not like, this is what's happening. And it's destroying the Alzheimer's field. We recently had a Nobel Prize winner. There's a series of publications that he published. I don't know if you followed this story. Maybe, I don't know how many it was. I think it's dozens. They've found research fraud in all of them. And this is like the guy who I think showed something about like oxygen sensors in cells. He won the Nobel Prize recently for that. And now there's this massive scandal around this guy. So the very top of the field, recently won a Nobel Prize, is now being, so science is selecting for these people.
Wow.
There are good people too. But it's harder to advance in science as a good person than it is as a bad person.
Dude, I mean, you see it on social media. I mean, social media is a microcosm. The social media, the academics that I've encountered on social media, I mean, obviously I don't want to paint all of them with such a broad stroke, but it's pretty easy to find academics on social media with serious personality disorders. And, particularly actually in nutrition, or at least maybe that's my own selection bias, because that's the field that I tend to pay the most attention to. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty, those types are pretty easy to find, like dark triad personality types on social media.
A dark triad. Yes. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. I know at least in the biological sciences, nutrition sciences, the sort of health, human sciences, they're everywhere. Because getting, again, caring about what other people think, getting their attention, saying the things that you need to say to get their attention, stoking outrage and stuff, those are the kinds of behaviors that are often associated, and to which people who are more inclined to those behaviors are they tend to have personality disorders. And so the people who thrive on social media often have personality disorders.
Oh yeah. Well, for my listeners, like, how would you say the average person should navigate the often contradictory advice that they see on social media?
That's like $1 million question. How do we,
like, for somebody listening that's not an academic, but is privy to.
Yeah, I think focusing on not necessarily, and this is not gonna, don't focus on the people who are super flashy all the time. Focus on people who are open to being wrong and pride themselves, and even signal that. I think it's not a perfect answer, because there are people who are kind of whack who can I use a curse word?
Yeah.
There are people who say all sorts of nonsense and all sorts of garbage. I mean, I don't want to talk shit, but let's talk about Paul Saladino, for example.
Okay.
This guy, he's a very sincere person. I think he means well, and he's smart too, right? He's clearly smart. And he talks about how he's trying to always question his own beliefs. Maybe even Paul's not that bad. Yeah, I think anybody who really signals that they're trying to question their own beliefs is somebody worth following. Now, if they're always acting like they're certain about everything, I think that's something to avoid. So somebody who's humble and who seems to be open to learning and developing is somebody worth following. They're not necessarily going to be right. I think actually Paul's moving in a more evidence-based direction over time. Would you say that?
Is he? I don't know. I honestly don't follow his. I don't think I follow him. I don't follow his content. We were friends at a certain point, and then his content kind of lost me. I'll just leave it there.
Yes. because he knows how to play the social media game too, and that's a part of it. He likes to say bombastic stuff, which is it's fine. But he used to be like just like all meat, you know?
Yeah.
And now he's much more like paleo like style now. I think watching people develop and being open to developing, I think you can learn maybe the most from those kinds of people. They're not necessarily going to be right. But the people who say they have the answer and they don't change, you want to avoid those people, I think.
That's smart. I've heard somebody say that a good sort of litmus test for somebody who's being a high integrity follow on social media is somebody who doesn't strawman the other argument, the other side, but instead steelmans it.
Yes. Charitability, right? Don't, people who regularly sort of smear other people or like find the worst part of what the other person's saying. And I've been guilty of this in the past. I've tried not to, but I've also often been hostile just because of what somebody represents in ways that I shouldn't have been. Somebody who regularly engages in that kind of like negative, hostile behavior, that's definitely kind of an ideological person that you want to avoid. Somebody who's charitable, especially somebody who reaches across aisles, so to speak, that's the kind of person for sure who steelmans, who looks for the best in the other person's argument rather than the worst, is definitely another really great signal.
Yeah.
And that's consistent with what we just said, right? Because somebody who's looking for the best in that other person's argument is somebody who's trying to learn from that other person.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I try to do that regularly. I try to go to people's profiles who more prominent personas who I don't, necessarily agree with on every point, but I try to at least see what the opposing viewpoint is, and I try to get a really clear sense of what that is, and I try to spend some time thinking about it and looking into the literature maybe, to just because I think it's really important to always be challenging your own beliefs and assumptions and things you hold to be true. And it's really valuable.
Yeah, it's the only way to do science properly. So otherwise we're just, it's not even even religion can be good. There are people who are serious about religion and think deeply about that. Otherwise it's a dumb form of religion. Yeah. So yeah, and that's, we're trying to understand the world, and if you just like always apply the same dumb concepts to the world, you're not gonna. Also, humans are very limited, right? We're kind of dumb, right? Like it's really hard to know what the truth is, and so throughout the course of our lives, we should be getting closer and closer to the truth, and that requires change.
Yeah.
So,
at what point did you transition from being primarily focused on nutrition, which is around the time that you and I met, to public policy surrounding COVID?
So I made this tweet about, like, basically, as I think you were following me during 2022, especially. I think during that year I was saying a lot more. I was like looking for areas that I could contribute to in different ways. And not just kind of sort of repeat orthodoxies, but kind of provide some additional information to people that would be useful to them. So one of those things that I did during that time, and I got so much stuff during 2022. I kept looking for like the holes in veganism, and I was a plant-based dieter, but I was looking for, I didn't always have the best experiences on a plant-based diet, right? I didn't feel great, like eating a totally vegan diet. I didn't feel good at all. I felt terrible. And I noticed if I ate like more fish, more animal products, sometimes I'd feel better. So then I started being, whoa, like, does this mean maybe there's some downsides to these plant-based diets from like a psychological or a well-being point of view? Then I started, asking what are those downsides? Where do they come from nutritionally? What are the vitamins and the nutrients like choline, creatine, some of the B vitamins, protein that might be limiting me? And then I started like writing about it. And then of course I was like really linked into the plant-based community at that time, and they didn't like it. But I was like, I'm feeling bad about this. Whenever I eat a plant-based diet, I know that the research literature indicates that people who consume a plant-based diet tend to have much higher rates of anxiety, depression, other things. I know that if you do randomized controlled trials using some of these vitamins and minerals like zinc, some of the B vitamins like folate, omega-3 fatty acids. Of course, these trials are not good enough for us to make definitive conclusions, but there's a signal there that suggests that if you add these to people's diets and you give these people who are depressed, they have these mental health issues, you make their mental health better. You can help their depression. So then I started thinking, well, I should be talking about this. If this is something I really passionately care about, these plant-based diets, and I'm having these experiences, it's reflected in the literature, I should be like looking deep into these weaknesses. And so I started talking about it, and I just got like reamed by people who called themselves evidence-based, but they didn't want to hear the evidence. So then I did that for a few things. I did that for vegan diets. I did that for like the sunscreen issue.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Horrible sunscreen thing, which is now almost the common sense now. Like now, even at my daughter's school, they tell the children only use mineral-based sunscreens, right? Like it's now becoming common sense. Not to say that chemical-based sunscreens are necessarily bad, but there's somewhat of an evidence gap still, and we don't really know. And so, well, side of caution. Once I started talking about that, then I got like semi-canceled. And at some point, I started thinking about the whole COVID thing, and I'm like, you know what? If people do this in the areas that I know really well, like I know this research in and out, I know these papers in and out, I know these people are mobbing me based on not understanding what I'm saying. They don't want to understand what I'm saying. They want not to understand what I'm saying.
They want not to understand.
They want not to understand. They're avoiding it. Then what about other issues? What about the COVID stuff? And I started seeing in the COVID space, like, hey, even in 2022, there were a bunch of people who were like, we should have zero COVID. If only everybody masked, was consistent with their masking. If only everybody we just made a decision as a society, we could get rid of this virus forever. And when people were still saying that, I was like, there's something really wrong with these people and with the way that we thought about COVID, because I think zero COVID was had a huge influence on the way that we approach COVID policy. So I started questioning things more. I retweeted this one tweet by Elon Musk that said, my pronouns are prosecutes Fauci. And I like commented on it like approvingly. And then like my followers who are like these New York Times bestseller selling nerds and like these other people who, are good boys in capital letters. They said that I was just grifting, by retweeting that and by talking about that. I was just trying to be open to different points of view. Mm-hmm. And then I started realizing like maybe there's a whole bunch of other points of view in the whole COVID space that have been marginalized unfairly, and that we really messed up for a lot of things with COVID. And people who have grievances about how the COVID policy went have a reasonable point of view. And so I just made this apology thread. You remember all this. You were here. I made this apology thread about this. It went viral. It was the first thread I ever had that went like really viral. Like went viral, period. Like I've had like 200 retweets and stuff or whatever before that. But like this got like 10,000 retweets and like over 1 million views. And that was the first time I was like, oh. And then I realized I tapped into something because I apologized for my part in basically being a jerk and like saying that anybody who questioned this is like spreading pseudoscience, and they weren't. I still didn't understand the extent to which that was the case at that time whenever I made that tweet, but I knew there was something there. And then I got this response, this overwhelming response, people like thanking me, like, oh my God, like you're seeing our point of view from like the establishment perspective. You're saying you guys got it wrong. And like everybody loved that. And I was like, wow, like what is it that I'm tapping into here? What is it that I'm connecting with? And then so I just read some of Jay Bhattacharya's work. He's been one of the big people. He wrote the Great Barrington Declaration with Sunetra Gupta, Martin Kulldorff, which was basically the criticism of the sort of mainstream COVID policy in 2020. That document, by the way, was actually essentially the mainstream of COVID, of like pandemic recommendations before 2020. So what we implemented in 2020 onward was actually something a radical departure from the scientific consensus up to that point.
Interesting.
Although there were pockets in the world, maybe in the UK and some places in the US, who did kind of believe that these very harsh measures were justified. In general, the consensus was kind of what Jay said. Anyways, I kept reading what Jay was writing, and he had been smeared and maligned and said he was a bad guy and all this other stuff. I started reading him, read this other person, wrote this Newsweek article, went on Tucker Carlson. Not sure if that was good, but and then my brain melted at that point because I read Jay's stuff. I evaluated it scientifically. I didn't agree with everything he said, or maybe I didn't agree with necessarily the framings on certain things, but whatever. Like a lot of stuff that he said was important and valid, and some of it might have been, from my point of view at that time, more right than what we had heard up to that point. But I got smeared. I got crushed. Like I had these massive social media mobs calling for me to be kicked out of med school. I was an MD PhD student. It's like a dual degree. You do 2 years med school. You do your PhD. You do the last 2 years of med school. You get both degrees. People kept like tagging my school saying I needed to be kicked out. I was too arrogant. I didn't listen to doctors. I was listening to doctors, just not the right doctors. I wasn't listening to their doctors, the doctors they thought were good, but they didn't know any better because they had just been blindly listening to whatever they had been told, and they didn't know what the science actually said. And then when the brain melting part though was when I realized that sometimes the establishment, the institutions, the overwhelming consensus, sometimes that's like radically wrong. And you can't necessarily look to the scientific authorities at any given time. Fauci was an authority for some reason that doesn't make sense to me, to know what you should think, which is it kind of sounds stupid. Like, of course you can't look to the authorities to always know what you should think. Like sometimes they're going to be wrong. But for me, I thought in general, science gets some things wrong, but it self-corrects over time. And overall, it's good. And I think that's still mostly the case, but there are periods of time and topics and areas of science that are completely wrong. And you can't always center yourself in the institution. So I had to start like thinking for myself. I always thought for myself, but I always thought I could still lean on that authority. But that's wrong.
You tweeted something like, maybe it was last week. It was something really recent where you said that science isn't handed down from the gods, which I loved. It's a method, but it's also an endeavor that is run by people who are fallible, who are ego-driven, who are reputation-driven, money-driven, and so it is. It can succumb to all the same fallacies that humans, are likely to succumbing to. It's not something that's like divinely parsed down from the gods. It's something that like we have to be able to think critically about it.
Authentic science is good, and it is a beautiful thing, and all these things that we have around us. This podcast that we're doing right now is a testament to the power of science, technology, sort of technological rationality. And so something about it works for sure. But
I'm going to read your tweet. Science isn't handed down by the gods. Science is created by men called scientists. Scientists can make mistakes. They can be biased. They can lie. They can be corrupt. Not all scientists seek the truth. Many don't. Science is an ideal, and most scientists fall short. I don't know about most. Maybe it's the case that most do.
I would say most. And maybe all. I would almost say all. I didn't say all only because I didn't want to come across as too radical. But it's all. All of us fall short as scientists. We all have biases. We all make mistakes as a result of those biases. We all say the wrong things sometimes because of those biases. We get things wrong. And in 100 years from now, looking back at what we're doing right now, we're going to be even more wrong than we can conceive of in some ways because we just don't know. But even given the evidence that we have at the time, we can still make mistakes about the actual evidence that we have at the time. And
those mistakes can hurt people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the frustration you had with your mother, and that you have with the Alzheimer's field. Is like their lack of attention to nutrition, for example, lack of attention to lifestyle, which is probably far more important than it is far more important than any of these like amyloid antibodies, which are probably harmful. Like you probably talked about this. Like,
oh yeah, there are meta-analyses that show that these drugs, whether aducanumab or lecanemab, actually accelerate brain atrophy.
And the FDA is, let's be just like blunt. Let's just be. The FDA is corrupt. Okay, FDA knows this. People in the FDA know this. Real scientists who are looking at this data know this stuff, but they approved it anyway because they want their. It's so terrible to talk about. I don't want to think about people like this, but like they want their cushy FDA job.
Well, it's not that we're trying to sow distrust. We're trying to sow skepticism and critical thinking, which has seemingly been lost in society today.
It's more than that. It's also that we're trying to make these institutions better by criticizing them. We can make them better if they are corrupt, and they are. Then, but they're not hopelessly broken, right? So they if we can make them better, we can make them good. Meaning the things that they're corrupt about probably don't need to change that much in order to get them to a place where they're actually doing great things. And by criticizing them, we actually can make the institutions better. That's the goal. It's not to break them down. It's to make them better. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And I think people don't like, if there's a reason to distrust the institutions, we should distrust them. Vinay Prasad at this recent conference said something like, if people started to actually trust the institutions again already, I would find that so morally repugnant. He would find that, he said, I'd find that disgusting because they deserve to be distrusted until they are doing the things that they need to do to earn the trust back. And if people decry the decline of trust in the institutions without actually fixing the problems, we're not the problem. The institutions are the problem. And so we're working to make the institutions better.
Yeah.
So
there was something I saw recently. I haven't vetted this, but nearly half of the FDA's budget comes from the industries that it regulates, allegedly. In the past 20 years, so on top of that, in the past 20 years, 11 out of 12 FDA commissioners have moved into roles connected with the pharmaceutical industry after leaving the agency. So it's that revolving door that we always hear about.
Yeah, Scott Gottlieb, who was the FDA commissioner during the pandemic, is now, I think, on the board of Pfizer. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Or Moderna is like one of these big ones. Yeah.
What do you think is the solution? I mean, do you think the solution is as clear cut as just making that illegal?
I'm not an expert on that particular policy question. I know that's like that seems like a good start. But what are the downsides to that? So this is like where we get into this whole area of like, okay, we have these ideals, but how does the real world work? Would there be any downsides to making that illegal? I don't see any. I think definitely restricting that much more than it is, and if we can make it illegal without causing huge problems, we should. So, but we'd have to figure out what, because there's always unintended consequences, right? That's kind of the whole issue with exactly what we were just talking about, the antibodies, right? The antibodies, you're going to take the amyloid out. Of course, that's great because amyloid's causing Alzheimer's, although it may not actually be causing Alzheimer's. So, but if it was causing Alzheimer's, you could still take the amyloid out, and it may still cause brain shrinkage anyway. So you're always looking for what is the collateral damage of any potential intervention that we have, and so it sounds like a great idea. I would love to do it, and if we can get the political will for that, and if that is the appropriate approach, then definitely it's too corrupt, and these financial incentives are making things corrupt, and we need to nip these at the bud. So,
well, allegedly that's why there are so many more food additives that are approved here in the United States that are simply illegal in other parts of the world, like the EU, where they take a more precautionary approach. Whereas here we take more of a risk management approach, and we put the burden of evidence of safety of these additives on the corporations that are producing them. And of course, there's going to be bias inherent in the data that they produce, whether via publication bias or other, you know?
Right. And yes. And
so I don't know. I mean, it's I would like to see more of a precautionary approach taken here in the United States, given that so many of our, the chronic conditions that people are suffering from today, we're just seeing such rampant rates of conditions that are mediated by food exposures.
Yeah, and so like, what is the downside to that, right?
Yeah.
The downside is that your tricks might not be as colorful as you wish they would be. Like, that's the downside. And is that actually, that's a good downside, because kids might not be like these are kind of weird.
They might eat less of it.
Might be a good thing.
Yeah.
So people are like, oh, but my tricks look like a weird faded color. Like, oh my God. Well, okay, that's actually good.
Yeah.
So,
It's so funny.
So yeah. Yeah, no, these food dyes for sure. I mean, we should definitely take a precautionary approach. It should be that unless you absolutely can show with like really gold standard large studies that these are absolutely safe, which I don't even know how you're going to do that, because there's all sorts of different ways they could be unsafe. It could be long-term effects, all these other things you can't. You should always take a precautionary approach, especially if it's like food coloring. Like, why do you need food coloring?
Yeah, and these chemicals are studied typically in isolation. Like they're typically not studied. Their interactions, with all of the other food additives, is virtually unknown. Similar to like going back to the sunblock issue. Like, there was a study that came out a couple of years ago that found that sunblock, when applied to the skin, I mean, what it does when simply applied to the skin, is one thing. The degree to which those chemicals make their way into circulation, the potential endocrine disrupting effects that they may or may not have, but also their interaction with other compounds that are in circulation, their interaction with other environmental exposures, their interaction with the sun, with the chlorine in pools, for example. I think it's so important that we take it just makes intuitive sense.
Well, the sunscreen issue is interesting on a whole bunch of other levels. Do you want to talk about the sunscreen stuff?
Yeah.
So there's observational studies that show that if you're exposed to more sun, you have like lower mortality rates. It may be the case that sun is actually like, for reasons we don't understand, because I think your skin is an organ. It secretes compounds. It secretes hormones in response to the sun. It may be the case that actually having some sun exposure is actually good.
Of course.
And that we've focused, and I don't want to say that this is true, right? I'm just speculating. And it's really important to point out that this is a speculation, because it's a speculation that I'm using in order to show how narrow-minded our sort of single issue biomedical approaches to things. But melanoma is bad. I've had a melanoma, right? I've had it taken off my arm. I had this stupid phase of my life where I would run around in the midday sun without a shirt and no sunscreen with like these, it's called dysplastic nevus syndrome. So my moles look all weird. And that means that they're more predisposed to becoming melanomas. And so as a result, I end up like an idiot with like, maybe it was a melanoma, or maybe it was overdiagnosed. And the doctor's like, oh, that kind of looks like a melanoma. I'm going to make $1,000 now if I cut it out. So I'm going to cut it out. I love my doctor, but there's these financial incentives there. And it's hard to diagnose melanoma. There's no clear cut. It's actually a complicated topic. Back to the topic. Excessive sun exposures, especially sunburns, tend to cause melanoma. Maybe not sun exposure as such, but sunburns. And so what we're doing is saying, well, because since sunburns cause melanoma, you can just sort of like kind of nuke sunburns essentially by applying sunscreen all the time whenever you're outside, and then you just don't have to worry about them anymore. But what if sunscreen's actually blocking the positive effects on the body of the sun? What if in our quest to eliminate melanoma and in our lack of knowledge about how all this stuff works together, we're actually reducing some extent of people's well-being and long-term health in other ways that we don't even know. And so this is a whole other issue. And then of course, as you were pointing out, the chemicals in sunscreen, the long-term, we don't have a lot of long-term studies on them. Whenever we saw what JAMA published, it was in like 2017, 2018. They saw that the levels of blood levels of these chemicals were much higher than the safety limit.
The threshold of toxicological concern.
That's right. You got that. Exactly. So then they had to do extra studies, and yet if you mention that, it's like you can't say that online because then you're spreading misinformation, even if the FDA said it. But yeah. So there's so much we don't understand, but people pretend that they understand, right? Because they want to be authorities. Why do people want to be authorities? It's because they want power. Why do they want power? There's something wrong with them.
100%. I mean, it's like anybody who wants to be the president. Joe Rogan says this all the time. There's something wrong with that person, whether he's your candidate or she's your candidate or not. Yeah, man, it's crazy. That's why I think the precautionary approach, that was originally devised for environmental protection reasons, I believe. But it makes perfect sense that the longer something has been, that humans have been exposed to it, whatever that exposure happens to be, whether it's to a food product, ingredient, or just a natural, the sun, for example. I just think it's going to take extraordinary evidence to, it would be an extraordinary claim that the sun is suddenly bad for you. Now, obviously, there are people living in Vegas of Eastern European ancestry, such as my family, who might not be adapted to midday exposure to the Las Vegas sun. Like, there are obviously precautions that should be taken in that context. But yeah, this idea and people that spend the entirety of their lives indoors. I think it's like something like 93% of our time the average American today spends indoors, and then goes on holiday somewhere. And just, from one day to the next, they're just exposed to the Caribbean sun. That's obviously problematic.
Yes.
But there is the concept of the solar callus where, deliberate, titrated exposure to the sun over time builds your resilience to it and allows you to derive all these benefits, like, the UVA rays and how that we've seen creates nitric oxide under the skin. There are all these other, the circadian, regulation that comes from sun exposure. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the pathologization of sun exposure is just nonsensical.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned, solar callus. If you go out earlier in the day, the sunlight is different. Apparently, there's different wavelengths earlier in the day. There's more like infrared or something like that.
Yeah, red, near infrared.
It actually primes the skin to then not be as damaged or not be damaged to the UV light. There's studies that show that they've systematically demonstrated that's the case. And so the way that you get your sun is also important. And so we lose all these nuances. But the one issue I want to bring up, I think that's interesting, is the precautionary principle maybe shouldn't be used for everything, right? That's why I mentioned with the cereal dyes and the tricks. Obviously, who gives a shit if you have mildly discolored tricks? Like, that's not really a problem,
right?
Except if you just like have the nostalgia for the beautifully colored tricks. But whatever,
it's a problem for the bottom line.
You have to get over it, yeah. But there are other topics, there are areas where there could be bigger downsides. And I need to come up with good examples, but let's say something about like environmental regulation, for example, or there's also, any kind of intervention. What's the precautionary principle? Great precautionary principle downside. So COVID is ripping through the country in 2020. It's almost like a precautionary principle, potentially, argument to say, well, just keep everybody inside until we know what's going on. But obviously the downsides of that are ridiculous. They can hurt the economy. They can hurt people, learning, all this other stuff. So all these, so regulations that you can add to sort of limit things that make sense to sort of like, another example. Let's better example. This is not going to resonate with your listeners. It's okay. GMOs. Let's talk about GMOs, right?
Yeah.
Genetically modifying the food system, it's scary. But like, if you can produce a lot more food as a result, and feed starving people, if you decided to then take the precautionary principle and say, well, we don't know exactly what the effects will be on the wheat, maybe it could like mutate and start killing us. I mean, if you do really good studies and you're like, yeah, it looks pretty good, then there's kind of a trade-off at that point, right? Because the precautionary principle might actually inhibit innovation, right?
Yeah.
Innovation is very important because we often do things with technology that break the old rules of nature, that break. We fly in airplanes. I flew in an airplane to get here. The precautionary principle would say I shouldn't fly in an airplane.
Fair.
I don't know, like, all of the environmental radiation that's going to be blasting on my head, and like maybe that's the cause of Alzheimer's, and maybe like my ears that are popping is actually like we don't know for sure that that's not an indication that I'm having eardrum damage that could lead to loss of hearing later on in life. We don't know.
Yeah.
So therefore, I shouldn't fly in planes. Well, if I didn't fly a plane, then I wouldn't be able to be here. I wouldn't be able to do the conference. So I lose other things. So every application of the precautionary principle actually needs to be also nuanced, and we have to think about, okay, what are we losing potentially if we apply the precautionary principle and restrict people's behavior, restrict innovation? What are we losing? So tricks is a great example because we're not losing anything, but there are places where we could lose something significant.
Well, also there are consequences of making that food more attractive to children, and that like you might be able to, you might be able to correlate the proliferation of these artificial food dyes with the obesity epidemic because they've just made fake foods so much more attractive to vulnerable populations like children.
I know that my mom used to swear up and down that if I had red food coloring, I would like become like a crazy kid. And I know that if you look at some of the published literature, there is evidence to support what my mom said.
Dude, I was with a friend last night. I was at my friend's boyfriend.
Does this have red food dye in it?
No, it doesn't. I don't think there's anything in my house with red dye in it.
Yeah.
I was at my friend's house last night, or my friend's boyfriend's house, and we were playing a game of Monopoly with his. My friend's boyfriend has 2 young children, and we were playing this game of Monopoly, and the little boy went into his room and brought back some Starburst. And thought nothing of it. Ate a handful of Starburst candy. We continued to play the game, and almost immediately after consuming them, started acting like bouncing off the walls, screaming, like bouncing off the walls, screaming, running from one room to the next, like all mid-game. And then at a certain point, it dawned on me, like he had just eaten these Starbursts, and I was like, maybe there's red 40. Like I'm not familiar with this literature at all. I don't have kids. It's not an area where I've spent any time, looking into the research. But I thought, could there possibly be red dye 40, which I've heard whispers of, like, oh my God, it like creates it's associated with hyperactivity in certain children. And lo and behold, Starburst has, red dye 40 in it. And it really got me thinking last night, like, what if this, like, this is playing out right in front of my very eyes, the impact that this...
Stop spreading misinformation, Max.
But I wonder, so you're saying...
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, but that would be called misinformation. Like if you share that anecdote and you're like, I wonder, and then you could maybe find a few studies that support that, then they're like, well, no, like the FDA says it's okay, like therefore, like you're not a scientist. Like, so, yeah, 100%.
So insane. I mean, I don't know, but there was definitely a correlation. Like he was fine 1 minute, and then the next after.
We need to do a crossover study with him. You need to get me access, and we'll run the crossover study.
Why was that? We were playing. I brought it up. It's like, was there red dye 40 in that candy? Turns out there was, and they were like, "Wow, we never thought about that before." So there I was sowing, fear.
We can do
food fear.
We can do a study.
We can. It's so interesting, man. Things really need to change. Are you optimistic?
No,
you're not.
No, I think it's gonna get terrible for a while.
You think?
Yeah, it's gonna be like this century's like. So you had like the Revolutionary War in the 1800s, Civil War in the 1900s, World War II in the 20th century. Wait, Civil War in the 1800s, 1900s, World War II, 20th century. What's going to be, so it's every 100 years, right?
Yeah.
If we keep following that same thing, they're I think we're headed toward that for our generation.
Do you think the outcome of the election, without getting into politics, do you think that can have any potential impact?
We're getting into politics, so I think Kamala will make things much worse. And then Trump, like I think people get Trump wrong. Like Trump,
I'm willing to admit that she would at least maintain the status quo, but
make it worse, like more status quo, like more censorship. Like all the time now. There's another clip, like Hillary just the other day said that she was talking about misinformation. Look, there's this crazy tweet. Did you see this?
Was it the John Kerry clip?
No,
that came out from
we're having one like every day.
Yeah.
Where they're now like it's like a campaign now. They're like talking about how we need to tamp down misinformation. It's really disturbing.
How the Constitution is problematic.
Yes, there's like multiple articles now about how in the last couple of months how the Constitution is problematic and how and I think they're going to go after X in particular because they're having these hit pieces on X. Let me find this bookmark. It's really a crazy thing that she said recently.
Damn.
And we're having this every single day. So she said, Hillary Clinton says social media platforms like X need to censor and monitor content because if they don't, quote, we lose total control. She's not even secretive about it. Quote, we should repeal Section 230. If they don't moderate content, we lose total control.
Scary.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Section 30 has to do with like whether or not social media platforms are publishers or platforms. And so I think, what is it? It's like, it's something that protects, basically, it's been a long time since I've read about it, but it's something that protects these social media companies and they want to gain more ability to regulate the social media companies.
It would put them under the domain of like the regulation that publishers have to adhere to.
Right.
Got it.
Right. I believe that's what getting rid of Section 230 means. And so then therefore they can immediately, government can, wait, so what's the issue? So these are platforms, therefore, yes, I think publishers have to,
they want to be able to regulate social media like they, I guess, are able to with publishers.
Something like that.
But I thought the media always had free speech. That's
why we're getting confused. Do you want to do Section 230?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's look it up. Yeah.
We'll do a Jamie moment.
Section 230? Is that what is?
Yeah, Section 230. I used to know a lot about this. It's embarrassing. So if you ask me how does the kidney work, I wouldn't be able to answer you. It provides immunity for online computer services with respect to third-party content generated by its users.
Section 230 is often cited in debates about free speech online because it enables platforms to host a wide range of user content without excessive legal risk, fostering an environment for open communication. However, critics argue that it also allows platforms to avoid accountability for harmful content and inconsistent moderation practices. So, yeah, it's exactly what we said.
Yeah. So, I think there's going to be a push, if Kamala gets in office, there's going to be a push to go back to sort of like 2020, 2021 COVID level anti-misinformation stuff. And I think there's an enormous consensus among like left-wing elites that's what they want to do. And I think that's terrifying. I think when Elon opened up X, he bought X, I think he really did a great service. And he allowed people, of course, yeah, there's all sorts of nonsense on there now. And honestly, that platform is.
There was before too, though. It just wasn't as, people, Elon's become the scapegoat because of his political leanings. But I mean, there was always garbage.
Oh man,
X.
It's getting.
And then the things that were censored on X were like dumb things like pronouns and like pushback against pronoun madness and
yes
all that stuff.
And he lifted that, and they don't like that. But there's also other things he lifted that I'm not saying it's wrong to have it out there, but it's like it's really offensive. Like there's so much anti-Semitism on X now.
I've seen it.
It's like a ridiculous amount. Like really old sort of anti-Semitic theories about like bankers, and they're all like the parasites that are trying to like undermine society on purpose so that they can then get complete control, like stuff like this. And
but But like what Elon has said, like I'm Jewish. I've come across anti-Semitism, and it's obviously it's not good. I mean, sometimes I guess I have thick skin, so I chuckle from it because I've encountered it. But as long as it's not illegal and it's not fomenting actual physical violence, I think at the end of the day, it's better to have a platform. I think it's better to have a platform where that can kind of be allowed to exist in the shadows. As opposed to, having some clandestine group, out there moderating what they perceive as hate speech.
One thing that I know,
because again, like words aren't violence. Violence is violence, and violence is like that should be. I think that should be illegal. That should be sought out and moderated.
Yeah, I think that whenever you have the free speech protections that we have in this country, which is more than any other country in the world, we have the most free speech protections. We're like, if you look at other countries and the way they look at us and the kind of free speech rights that we have, they think we're crazy. Like they think that, so we have like free speech and the guns. We have like guns everywhere and free speech. They think we're crazy. So we're great there. And part of having that is having like this nasty stuff that you see. There's some historians of Nazi Germany who have pointed out that the authorities tried to repress the Nazi Party over and over again. We talk about how like, oh, we don't want like fascism to rise, so we have to like tamp down on it. But actually, that's what happened in Germany. And there are some interpretations. I don't know how mainstream this is, but I've seen it in like mainstream like documentaries, so I don't know. But there's some interpretations that actually they did that actually gave like Hitler more, because the government was very unpopular, right? And so then Hitler would do these terrible, like say these terrible things, or in his party would say these terrible things. People actually were in his party that were worse than him, and then the government would repress them, and then they would like fight back against the government, and it would actually give more visibility, the Streisand effect. It would give more visibility to these Nazi ideas. And so
what is the Streisand effect?
Streisand effect. I think Barbara Streisand, like I think somebody took like a picture of her house or something, and then she like sued them, and it became very public, and then everybody found like the picture of her house.
The Streisand effect is a phenomenon where an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information unintentionally results in that information receiving much more publicity. Wow, very interesting. Term is named after the singer Barbra Streisand, whose effort to suppress photos of her home inadvertently led to increased public interest and widespread sharing of the images. Wow. The Streisand effect. Very interesting.
So the same thing. So anyway, anyway, back to it. I think what he did is amazing, and we might end up in a pre-X era again, back in like the 2020, 2021 again. I think that would be terrible. And it's not like, as you said, it's not like there wasn't plenty of misinformation. There wasn't plenty of misinformation on X anyway, or Twitter anyway. But we were also suppressing all sorts of stuff that's true, right? Like a lot of the criticism of gender ideology or COVID were suppressed. And so,
well, I thought that the Twitter files were amazing. Like the release of all that stuff that Matt Taibbi covered, and I think Barry Weiss. Like I thought that was like just such an amazing boon for democracy.
Yes.
When Elon
and that would have
light on that.
That would have only happened. But they're trying to put so then whenever Kamala gets, I think that's what they're going to try to do. I think here's what I think about Trump though. I think Trump is like, he's not this fascist strongman. That's a crazy thought. He's so undisciplined and random. Like has like severe ADHD. Like there's no way he's gonna like be like the Mussolini. He just doesn't have that in him. Also, he's a narcissist. Okay, he really cares about what other people think about him, which is actually good in a way, because if he does something like that has like real bad effects, he's gonna correct it in response to that outcry, or he's gonna like try to. That's part of the reason why he went along with like Fauci and stuff during COVID, right? Because it was blowing back, and he's not this kind of guy to like lean into like certain. I'm gonna do this no matter what. It's the right thing to do. It's a principle. He's not that kind of guy. He cares about the public. There's no way he's gonna be this like fascist strong. That's so ridiculous. That's such a. If anything, he's going to just not make things worse, right? He's gonna loosen things up a little bit. He's not going to make things worse, and so I think that's why But the thing is like the things that are getting worse, in my opinion, even if he gets in power, like there's still those forces trying to. So I think after him,
well, I love I love the fact that he's lent an ear to RFK. Who obviously has made the chronic disease epidemic.
Yeah.
Like that whole issue has been completely ignored by the other side.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, and Trump is more disciplined. He knows this is his last chance, right? He knows this is his last chance. He has people like Elon, RFK. I don't know who else. JD Vance is super smart. I think because of that, he actually has a chance of being somewhat revolutionary. He's not going to be a strong man. That's such a dumb idea. But he has a chance of making revolutionary change in ways not like a big revolution, but he can significantly change America in ways that could be very positive as well. Kamala's not going to do that.
No, she's
going to let in more immigrants. It's going to be worse. So that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, it's like were I to vote for him, it wouldn't. My vote wouldn't necessarily be for him as much as it would be against the alternative,
Yes.
and for ideals and policies that I mostly agree with. I'm always going to be pro-choice. I'm always going to be in support of reproductive freedom for women. But yeah, I mean, like the idea of small government, attention being paid to these kinds of pressing public health issues like the chronic disease crisis and nutrition in America. The fact that the other side has really, as we've talked about, has outed themselves as being the pro-censorship party. Like
pro-censorship, pro-corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my stance on that.
100%. I think he's the only option. Despite being Trump, he's the only option, like, in my opinion. Amen. So go vote for Trump.
You said before we started recording that you're no longer on a plant-based diet.
Oh, you're trying to get me here? You're like, are you going to endorse meat now? You need to endorse meat.
Yeah. Can we? Can we break the news?
Yeah. Well, I'm not on a plant-based diet, and that's mostly because I.
But you correct me if I'm wrong. When we originally talked about this, it was mostly for like ethical reasons, right? Or was it primarily health?
It was primarily ethical reasons originally, yes. And yes, it was ethical reasons mostly, yes. Maybe there's some health reason. You can get your cholesterol a little bit lower.
Yeah.
You'll probably end up with a lower body weight. Like that's probably what the research literature says. If a whole food plant-based diet, you probably end up with a significantly lower body weight. You end up like Michael Greger looking like a skeleton.
Oh yeah, but only because like whole plants are just so not calorie dense, right?
Yeah.
So but also with less muscle mass.
Yes, you end up like a skinny person with a belly. You look like Bill Gates, smaller Bill Gates or something. So,
skinny fat.
Yeah. It sucks. And of course, I trained a lot, so I never ended up looking like that. But yeah. So yeah, I did it for primarily for ethical reasons. But at some point, I wanted to get jacked and like huge, and so I was doing more meat. And then I had this dream of making like a plant-based food company, which I still may do, where we, instead of having just like this ideology, just eat more soy or whatever, stupid thing. What if there's like a plant-based food that, I think we've talked to you about this, sent messages, and you're like, I actually sent you a message like, are you interested in doing this? He's like, no, man, I'm not interested in doing this. Like, what is this?
Because you were like, if I had a piece of steak, we're going to get you to eat a soy burger.
Well, no, but it's this one. It's with modern technology, I don't know if you follow like the Quest food stuff. I just had a protein bar, right? That protein bar tastes really good, right? That's like using food processing technology for, health.
Yeah.
There may be food processing technology that you can use to then make plant-based foods that are healthy, that also are supplemented by sort of the things that you'd find more in meat, that will then sort of compensate for the downsides of that. And of course, people don't like that idea. Because they're like, I don't want to eat this like food made by factories and stuff. But
what's your take from an ethical standpoint? Your take on the notion that, if you were to sacrifice one cow, that could feed you,
Yeah, I'm not so interested in the sort of like the sentience kind of argument, like, oh, it's a sentient being, therefore you can't kill it. That's not like my ethical. It's more like the way that they're treated.
Yeah.
Right. Like factory farmed animals, like factory farmed chickens. It's kind of like torture, especially the egg-laying chickens that stay in the same cage all the time.
I completely agree with that. Yeah. I think most sentient people would agree. Most reasonable people would agree with that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't producers that are doing it differently.
Sure.
That's always been my argument. Like, the way to improve the system is not by opting out of it, but instead by voting with your dollar for the system that you want to see. I mean, a perfect example of that, maybe it's not a perfect example, but like Siete Foods, for example, which is a food manufacturer. They make ultra processed foods, but they've committed to, most of their products, I believe, are grain free. They don't use seed oils. I mean, obviously that's a whole separate debate, but like they from day one sought to be a better for you producer of ultra processed comfort foods, and they were recently acquired by PepsiCo for $1.2 billion. Based on the success and of their brand, and I think that's a really solid illustration of the fact that their success got the attention of this mega multinational junk food producer, PepsiCo, right? Producer of sugar sweetened beverages and the like, who now got behind and put their money where their mouth is to get behind this better for you ultra processed food producer, which is the result of people voting for their dollars for a company that's doing things differently, using slightly better ingredients than the norm.
I like that idea. I think that's a really good thing. The problem with sort of the animal product stuff, like let's look at like pastured eggs, right?
Yeah.
Truly not free range, but like pastured. Like there's these distinctions. Like there's cage free, there's free range, and apparently like there's pastured. Like there's several different, and then only like pasture are really the ones that they actually run around all the time. Like cage free, apparently they have to have like 30 minutes, and it's like this small enclosure that's outside. Like, oh, that's to do the real ones, it costs like a lot more money. It's like 3 times as much money for the same eggs. Consumers just aren't going to buy that.
Yeah. It's more expensive.
So it's like there's also a scalability problem. You can't. We're privileged, and this is kind of part of the whole criticism of like the wellness sort of thing. It's like as privileged people we can do that. It's good, right? It's good that we look after our health, but like you're not going to scale that solution up to like some like poor second generation Mexican in Texas, for example, or just most people aren't going to be as concerned about it as us. So if you want to eliminate the problem, if you want to like not eliminate, but if you want to really substantially address the problem, get rid of like these terrible factory farms that do abuse animals, it's not really enough. Consumer choice is good, but like given the scalability problem and the price issues, people are not going to opt into that system. You have to create a new system. And one alternative system is to have basically the same sorts of nutrition, but in like a processed form that's like using modern technology that could get you to the same outcome.
Yeah.
Again, there's limitations to that too, right? Because people aren't gonna like be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna replace eggs with this weird bar that you made, this crunchy chips or whatever the hell you did. I'm not gonna do that. That's weird, and it is weird. And so maybe you're not gonna get everybody to opt out of it. But if you make more choices along those lines, right? You make the choices of that. Maybe this is the better framing, right? I just realized you make you give people pastured egg choice, but you also give people other like plant-based choices that are maybe like industrially produced or whatever, or you can use like this fungi protein or like the cell-based meat. Like there's all sorts of other and you add more things to the menus that then people can then maybe opt out of and making them better.
Yeah.
Here's one of the really interesting ideas I like. What if you could take some of like the advantages of veganism, the health advantages, assuming we believe in cholesterol hypothesis, the lipid hypothesis to some extent?
Yeah.
Okay. You can get cholesterol down through certain, like there's all sorts of nutritional ways to do that, right? Less dietary cholesterol for hyper-responders. I'm a hyper-responder, so I get really high cholesterol in response to eating eggs.
How do you know? Have you done like the phytosterol test?
No. Well, that's interesting. I haven't done that, but I have like seen what my blood cholesterol looks like when I'm eating a ton of eggs, and it's crazy. It's like really high.
Wow.
And I've seen what it looks like when I'm not. So, but I haven't done a controlled experiment, so a little bit spreading misinformation about myself. But there are other ways, like for example, psyllium husk, which is what's in Metamucil, that can also achieve a similar drop in cholesterol. It can see a very substantial drop in blood cholesterol levels.
I don't think most people know this, but it's super interesting that you bring it up. It's every 1 gram of soluble fiber you ingest usually leads to a 1 point. So it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. Every 1 gram of soluble fiber you ingest typically leads to a 1 point LDL drop.
So there are ingredients that we can add to foods and approaches that we could potentially take that could still. So Quest has these chips that are like these protein chips. I've never had them, but I had a girlfriend who did, and she said that they were amazing.
They're great.
Yeah. So what if we can make like these processed foods that have these unique qualities that traditionally you'd never have because you're using modern technology, and you're lowering blood cholesterol, you are adding protein to that, you're adding choline, creatine. What is that? What is the
Cocoflavanols?
The other one that you were mentioning, the one that
astaxanthin.
You add astaxanthin. You can make these special functional foods that are really cheap and that taste really good. So it's like one of the things that is like really cool that I think that Elon does is he makes he's like helping with the environment, right? But the Teslas are also badass, right? What if you can make foods that are like ethical, but like they're so badass that people want to eat them, even though maybe they don't give a shit about the ethical part. They just want to eat them because they're so badass. What if we can make plant-based foods that are like that? And so that like becomes like my dream that I'll never do because I can't ever get myself to write the business proposal. I've like have it written, but then I end up doing like other stuff.
Well, you're right. There are certainly some ultra processed foods that are great. The Quest chips are fantastic, and I have no affiliation with Quest, but like they're made with psyllium husk too, by the way, and yeah, they're great. But yeah, there are definitely some ultra processed foods that I think can be really beneficial.
Yeah, what if we leverage modern technology and leverage like flavor, taste technology? Like they know how to do this, right? They know how to make these hyper palatable. What if you can make hyper palatable healthy foods that actually achieve these specific targeted public health relevant effects, right? Exactly what you're talking about with these better ingredients. Frito-Lay's has been doing something similar with salt for a long time. They used to have these larger granules, but if you crunch them down into smaller granules, you can use less sodium and get the same taste because you have the same surface area, right? Kosher salt. In order to get the same amount of saltiness for kosher salt, assuming it doesn't dissolve into the solution, but it's like on top, you actually need to use more mass salt because the surface area. So by breaking it into smaller particles, you get the same flavor with less. So there's ways to use food processing technology to make foods more healthy. And so that was why did we get into the whether I was plant-based. So this is my dream, but then I was like, yeah, this is the excuse I made for myself. It's like I want to get jacked. I've got like milk. I'm gonna drink like a gallon of milk a day. And I looked much bigger like 2 months ago than I do now. I look ridiculous right now, but I got really big. I was like 160 pounds and I got to like 220, 230. I was like really big. I'm like 215 now and I'm fat, but so it's like whatever. But like, I would drink a gallon of milk a day and I was like, you know what? We'll do the plant-based stuff later. And I was like making an excuse for myself. We'll do it later. And I still do think that we should be concerned about so I'm kind of a hypocrite. We should be concerned about the animals.
Of course.
So
I am.
So
I totally am.
But so we should make more options that will allow people to more easily transition if they want to, or maybe they'll just stop eating eggs because they want to eat my industrially produced stuff more.
Yeah.
And then that horrifies you, right? But we'll put choline in it. Don't worry. We'll put choline in it. We'll put astaxanthin in it. We'll make sure that it replaces the eggs so that you don't have this like health predicament of your ethical. You're like, oh my God, don't eat it. You need to eat eggs. Or maybe, you'll just, in 2 or 3 years, we'll not be friends anymore and you'll be inveighing against me and my food company. So
no, I definitely indulge in the odd ultra processed food here and there, but I try to opt for the better for you options. I mean, protein chips.
Yeah, but we could replace animal products with it. You're being nice now. I remember whenever we were DMing about this, you were like, "Hell no! Like, what the hell is this? You're making fun of me." But yeah, anyway.
Weren't you also using the It was like a salt alternative that had potassium.
Yeah.
Right?
So now we're getting into the sort of wellness stuff. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So there's been there's actually a large randomized controlled trial literature. Okay, we know salt reduction doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. Maybe you get blood pressure down a little bit, but all the salt reduction randomized controlled trials looking at hard outcomes like heart failure and stuff like that, it doesn't, there's like no good outcome. Part of the reason may be that sodium is actually good for you. Now, I'm just spreading misinformation right now. I just want to let you, disclaimer, we don't know what that is. And it is true that if you reduce salt, you do reduce blood pressure. But there may be other positive benefits of salt. Depressed people have a higher salt preference.
Very interesting.
They enjoy salt more. They go after salty foods more. That's been shown in studies.
Why do you think that is?
I wonder if salt is important for mental health. I noticed that whenever I once gave blood recently. I gave blood and then I ran like 3 or 4 miles, and then I was like, I started feeling like bad, and I think part of the reason is my electrolytes are bad. And then I took a Pedialyte or something. I felt like instantly so good. It felt so good, and I don't know how much research there is on like salt and like mental. It could be the case, right?
Do you think that for some, consuming more salt can actually improve their mental health?
We're going to get me in trouble. Now, yes, consume more salt to cure depression. This is the way. Maybe.
For some.
No, I think there's maybe all sorts of nutrients that people are off on, maybe for their genetics or maybe just in general, that we don't even know that if they consume more, they would make their lives better, but we don't even know it.
Yeah.
Like if you do a randomized controlled trial on all depressed people using just like omega-3 fatty acids or salt, you may find no effect, right? Or maybe nothing, or like it's like maybe 50 people on each arm and you find like no effect. But what if there's certain people who need that and are not getting enough, and they are getting an effect, a real effect, and a randomized controlled trial can't pick that up?
Super interesting.
So there's a whole study design paradigm problem there. But there's ways to deal with that, but but I think that salt may actually be good for health broadly. People consume less really low levels of salt. Again, epidemiology is very confounded, so you don't know that this is causal, but it could be people who consume very low levels of salt, they have higher mortality. There's so many reasons why that might be the case. I can even come up with the reasons why it's confounded, but I don't. And so this whole emphasis on salt and blood pressure, it may be only one of the things that salt does. It may reduce blood pressure, and it may be good for that. So here's, so that's kind of a tangent. Nonetheless, there's a way to not only reduce blood pressure, but also get good outcomes. So as I've said, when you have reduced salt in these clinical trials, you don't get an improvement in outcomes. Very good. But there is a way to get an improvement in outcomes while reducing salt, and that is through these potassium salt mixtures. So potassium kind of plays the opposite role of salt, at least in the kidney. More salt causes more blood volume because of the way that the sodium potassium transporter works. I think salt, like it's 3 to 2 ions. Do you remember this stuff? It's 3. It's like, anyway, you'll reduce your blood volume if you take in more salt. You'll increase your blood volume if you take in more salt. You'll increase your blood pressure. You'll reduce your blood volume if you take in more potassium. And you reduce your blood pressure because the water is getting passed out with the. Here's what it is: the sodium potassium transporter, the sodium transporter transports. The sodium potassium transporter transports 3 potassium ions out and 2 sodium ions in, so that whenever you have an excess of potassium, it's going to try to get those potassium ions out while preserving some of the sodium, but you're going to have overall fewer ions, and that's the reason, because the water is going to follow the ions out, the electrolytes out, because of osmolarity stuff. So if you have a salt potassium mixture, 50%, you're going to reduce your blood pressure. Now, it just so happens that doesn't taste great. Nobody likes to eat sodium or potassium salts, potassium chloride. It doesn't taste that good. But it just so happens that potassium has a savory flavor to it. Too much of it is bad. But if you do something like 75% sodium and 25% potassium, it actually tastes better than normal table salt. Most people rate it as tasting better because it adds an extra savory dimension to it. If you do too much in the opposite direction, it's not good, but adding some is actually tastes better. Finally, they've done randomized controlled trials in China where basically they just go to people's kitchens and they replace it with like 75% with 75% potassium salt, 25% sodium salt. It's a mixture. And they find rate of stroke goes down, rate of heart disease goes down, rate of death goes down, with no significant increase in hyperkalemia, which is like an excess of level of salt. And these are people who tend to be at risk, so they have higher blood pressure. They've had past heart attack events and stuff. So there's a way, if you have blood pressure issues, which I do, I have chronic blood pressure issues because it's my genetics. It's not, no matter how thin I get mildly hypertensive, maybe pre-hypertensive is the way you define it. But it's still, any kind of hypertension is going to in a dose response manner increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. And getting below the normal level also reduces it even below the normal level. So even if humans have really high blood pressure for mammals, and that's because we stand upright, right? In order to get all that blood all through that column up to the brain, you have to really have higher blood pressure.
Wow.
So these bipedal mammals in particular. Now, mammals in general have somewhat high blood pressure, but the animals, the quadrupedal animals, have much lower than humans do. Other animals that have really high blood pressure are things like birds. Birds have super high blood pressure. Guess what? When you look at the birds, like the eagles, the turkeys, and you open them up after they're 1 or 2 years old, extensive atherosclerosis.
Interesting.
Right? So that's one of the reasons why humans may be particularly prone to atherosclerosis, because it's because we're bipedal. And
that's so cool.
And giraffes also have a similar problem.
Wow.
And they have all these adaptations to make it so their blood can get to the brain and they don't get edema. Do you know that giraffes have like special fibrous, like almost like boot like to fight edema in humans? You can like wear like tight leggings. Giraffes have that naturally.
Like compression socks.
They have like compression socks, biological compression socks around their legs. So anyway, keeping your blood pressure low is great. It's going to reduce your lifelong risk of heart disease. Heart disease is going to kill the average person more than anything else. So there's no downside to consuming. It reduces risk of death. It reduces mortality. It tastes good. Randomized control trials demonstrate it. Having 75% sodium, 25% potassium salt mixture.
Well, what if the issue is like for most people when they reduce their consumption of ultra processed foods, which they should, and that's usually the gateway by which most people tend to overconsume sodium, they reduce their consumption of those foods and they increase their potassium, which apparently 90% plus of adults don't consume adequate potassium on a daily basis. They increase their consumption of potassium. Would you say that that's a fairly, that might be an effective safeguard?
Yeah. Of course, like if you have like this perfect, beautiful diet with like the kale and the, do you eat kale?
I eat kale. Yeah, I like kale. Yeah.
Yeah. You're lying.
No, I do.
Stop fucking lying.
I had the kale
Nobody likes
last
kale.
night.
Stop wellness virtue. So nobody likes kale.
It depends on how it's made. Have you heard of Erewhon? It's like the LA supermarket, it's like Eden for anybody interested in health and wellness products. It's very overpriced, but anyway, they make a salad there. It's a supermarket where they also have like a really highly regarded hot food bar and salad bar. They have a salad there. It's called the kale and white bean avocado salad. It's 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. But
it's probably not the kale that's doing it though. It's something else they're adding. It's
they add maple syrup to it. They add all this other stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, if you're eating this beautiful diet, but
the point is you don't want to consume zero sodium because sodium has all these other potential benefits.
It may be bad for you to actually consume. The other thing is establishing these really high sodium intakes was only really done in these crazy countries like Japan and like I think it's like Norway. These countries they eat these incredibly high sodium. Within the normal range of sodium consumption in the West, it may not actually be that harmful. It may only be in these extreme cases, and so. Some sodium may actually be good. You may need sodium to feel normal and to be normal and to operate normal. It may be important for your heart, proper conduction. We don't know.
But also if these studies
I'm making these things up. I'm not making them up. There's reasons to believe these things, but we don't know. So,
and also, if these studies are done on Asian populations, I mean, the generalizability is limited, right?
Right.
To
They're
Eastern
different genetically.
Europeans, yeah.
I know that like the ideology in like medicine now is that's called, what is it called? Race-based medicine. And you're not allowed to do that anymore. You're not allowed to stratify by race anymore because race is it's a cultural construction.
It's a cultural construction.
It's so funny that you're laughing at this. This is the mainstream view.
Wow.
Now. Among idiots, if you're a researcher who understands genetics and you're a doctor, like you're gonna be like, this is kind of crazy, like, but like everybody else is just they go along with it. It's called race-based medicine. So we're not allowed to say these things, but of course this is true. Like there are differences in frequencies of different genetic polymorphisms in different populations, and those do have important effects on health. One really great example is in African Americans, people of African descent. They have they tend to have higher blood pressure because they are sodium sparing. Why? Because if you're in the Africa and you're sweating all the time, you're going to want to maintain and retain as much sodium as possible. So then in a Western context of eating a ton of sodium, that's actually detrimental, but it wouldn't be as much for a European who doesn't have as much of that problem. But we can't talk about that because race is a cultural construction, and which is actually harmful to patients.
Totally.
It's completely terrible. It's actually racist. Because it actually hurts the patients you're claiming to want to help, you know. So,
man, Kevin Bass for president.
I wrote this piece in New York Post about that, and I included my school. I mentioned them as part of the reason they hate me more. I recently learned that from somebody at my school. I finally got in touch with somebody, and they said that they really hate me, and I think that's part of the reason. I mentioned them. I actually provided documents and stuff that from our lectures in the New York Post article. It did pretty well, and they probably read that. We're not very happy, but they're teaching it everywhere. These kinds of concepts, and it's racist. It's harmful. It's not wrong to say that different racial groups have different genetics.
Well, medicine shouldn't be woke.
It should be anything. It should be science.
Yeah, it should be science.
It should be science. What is the facts? You know?
Yeah. And
there is a social constructedness of race, right? Like, I guess. Like, if you...
I don't know.
You're like, well, if you're in Brazil... Okay, so what they'll say, maybe this is wrong, but if you're like in Brazil, apparently there's like many races or like... It's like, because it's like a, you know...
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what they say is, well, therefore... This is a construction because why is it that way in Brazil and this way in America? Well, the reason it is that way in Brazil and America is that in Brazil, literally, it's like a whole huge shade of things, whereas there's less intermixing in America. So yeah, we're gonna see it differently, and that's a cultural construction in a sense, but that's also reflecting the actual racial composition of the country. So it's a cultural construction that's reflecting reality. Yeah. So. Anyway, I just argued. I was just thinking about that out loud because.
You wrote a Post article on that?
New York Post. Yeah, New York Post. On DEI in medicine and why DEI is destroying medicine.
Wow.
Do you want to hear more?
I think we'll link the article in the show notes. But yeah, man, I don't hate you. I think you're a big teddy bear. I'm always grateful any chance I get to powwow with you. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy you don't hate me. No, we're homies. We're homies, and I'm grateful for the work that you're putting out into the world. So I want to mention some other thing that I'm doing with my work. Also, think about the personal hits that RFK has taken over the decades. You know, sometimes that's horrific. Yeah. Yeah. To advance controversial ideas, sometimes you're going to piss people off, but as long as I think your why is for the betterment of humanity, for society, I think you just got to forge ahead, and take the hits. I think he's also a fighter. I think certain people are that way, and I'm that way. So I think that's just what I'm going to do. So yes, and there is a benefit to society by being that way, and also somewhat enjoying that. I'm sure he enjoys what he does. You know what I mean? Yeah. The hits are ridiculous, though. Mm-hmm. I do want to mention about what I'm doing for. So I just started working for this company. I'm not sure how much I talked about it. This think tank, and we're basically looking at media statements about pandemics. Mm-hmm. And we may do other science as well, and we're systematically characterizing them. So all the transcripts, all the broadcasts, everything that's ever been done
and said by like MSNBC, CNN, etc., is all available for data mining. I could literally download it all and have text searches done through it. You can use AI methods, etc., to find where they've ever talked about, say, like the mortality rate of bird flu. We're going to publish on this in a week. The way they're talking about bird flu is like it's going to kill everybody if it ever jumps to humans, which is ridiculous. They're saying it's got a 50% mortality rate. Well, the reason it's a 50% mortality rate is because of the people who get bird flu, only the most severe cases tend to get reported. There's tons of asymptomatic or less symptomatic people. It's always been the case at the beginning of pandemics or the beginning of first finding any sort of infectious pathogen that the mortality rate is going to be over. But they don't ever mention that. They just say 50% mortality rate, including the World Health Organization. They know better, but they're doing it anyway. Why? Because it's good for them. The more they hype a pandemic or whatever, the more money they can get, and the more influence. So if we can show systematically that that's what they're doing, instead of talking about these other issues, we can show that there's a systematic bias in this one direction. We can compare it to what the actual scientific literature says. We can do that on any topic about COVID. We can do it over a period of time and quantify it and show it in these graphs. And that's what my job is right now. And so we're gonna put out some papers. I have a boss who's a killer. He publishes a million different things all the time. So he's like, I started this job a month ago. I have this
pause. Okay, you started this job a month ago.
Does it actually pause if you say pause?
No. I was just saying like wait for the.
Okay. But then like I barely like I've just started, but he already wants me to put out a paper in a week. So we're going to go do that about bird flu and on this particular topic. And that's
what's the name of the think tank?
I don't know if I should say yet because
Okay.
like I don't know how bad things are going to get for like people trying to torment me and like harass my my colleagues and my boss. I don't know if it's going to come back, and I need to talk to him about when we're going to because we're going to publish soon. We're going to publish in a week anyway. It's Collateral Global, so we're going to publish in a week. I don't know when this is coming out, but it's Collateral Global. It's it's like basically Jay Bhattacharya founded the think tank.
Dope.
Yeah, and
Dope,
he's in the board. He basically got me the job. He's like, shit, Kevin's like, shit out of luck. And I also had like this, Destiny wanted me to do a debate. Do you know Destiny?
No.
It sounds like a girl, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not?
it's not a girl. He's
a guy
just
named
a weird
Destiny?
guy.
Wow.
It's a weird guy named Destiny. He's a progressive. He's like a really famous, like he's like one of the most, he's like a debate bro.
Does he have a last name or is his Destiny his mononym?
You can look him up. You can look him up.
Just search Destiny.
Destiny, no, he'll come up. He's a douche. He's like a real, but apparently he's very, very smart. Like apparently he's like me in the kind of detail I go into in things, but he does it in politics. So apparently he's like my alter ego on the left in sort of politic area. Anyway, I ragged on him after he went on Piers Morgan. He says all sorts of crazy stuff. I ragged on him when he went on Piers Morgan, and he responded and he called me like a right-wing conspiracy goofball. And I said, no, I'm not. But because of this exchange that I had, and we're going to have a debate. We're supposed to have a debate like earlier this year, but I wanted to prove my point and really. So, basically, I said that like during the early pandemic, right? They said that the vaccine would stop transmission of COVID-19. Like the vaccine would stop it in the pandemic. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And like they were saying it all the time.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "No, that's never happened." And I was like, yes, it did." And I know because I know I know what they. So I collected all the statements, like that I could find, and then I create this project proposal about this, not just on this topic, but on a whole bunch of other topics. And I gave it to Jay, and Jay was like, "Wow, this is really good. Like we should write a paper about this." And I was like, "Okay, we'll write a paper." And then he just based on this idea, he hired me for Collateral Global. So based on this internet squabble I had with Destiny, now I have this job.
Wow.
So that's kind of a funny.
That's dope.
So, but then I will someday do. Jordan Peterson just had a debate with him a couple months ago.
Oh, interesting.
I think
With Destiny?
Yeah, I think Lex Friedman might have talked to him.
Interesting.
He was doing, or Ben Shapiro. So he was doing the rounds on sort of the dark web for.
The dark web.
The dark web or the alt-right, the way we used to call it, whatever those names we used to use. for like a couple months ago, and but like once we actually publish these papers and do this job, like I'm just gonna wreck him. Like I'm gonna have literally scientific publications showing the debate point that I challenged him to, like because of the.
Damn, so interesting. Well, we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah.
This feels like a good place to cap it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where can people find you on social media? How can they follow you, learn more, support your work? You have like a Substack, right?
Substack, yeah. So on Substack, I'm telling my med school story. It's like super popular right now. It's like tripled in size over the last like 3 months. We're at 10,000 subscribers.
Wow.
It was like 3,000 a few months ago. And I think I'm going to try to get to 20,000 by the end of the year. We'll see if that's too ambitious, but it's like going crazy. I showed you.
Yeah. We'll see if we can help.
And if you guys want to follow that and like follow my med school story and like the crazy stuff and like me getting sued and all this other stuff, and then like the battle that will come out of that situation, you can come to my Substack and it's free. Everything's free. Nothing's paywalled, and maybe occasionally I'll paywall something about science or something, but like 99% will be free. So
all right. And on X, you're Kevin N. Bass,
yeah,
right?
but my Twitter sucks. My X account sucks so bad. The algorithm hates me. I'm pretty sure the algorithm has flagged me as like a
your X account's one of my favorites. I love it.
but nothing trends anymore. Most I get is like 20,000 views now. I don't understand why. I used to get like millions, and I get like 10.
What, you think Elon shadow banned you or something?
I don't know. I think somebody might have. Somebody might have shadow banned me or throttled me. I know a number of other people in this sort of space who feel the same way. Substack, I go crazy. I have like a 10% of the followers on Substack, and Substack is like 10 times smaller, but I'm going much crazier on Substack than Twitter with the same
interesting
things. So I'm saying the same thing. So yeah, follow the Substack. You can also follow my Twitter. I usually post more like stupid stuff on Twitter, like my random thoughts that come out of my head that I probably shouldn't post on Twitter. No, they're not bad. It's just like dumb stuff. And on Substack, it's a little bit more curated and like precise. And then I also like whatever we do.
Whatever.
All
right. Well, we like it. Thanks, Kevin. I think you're an important voice. And yeah, this was a great round two. For people that are interested, yeah, we did a round one like 2 years ago, I think, at this point. It was like primarily nutrition focused, I want to say,
yeah,
right?
We talked about LDL and like
all that stuff,
yeah.
Seed oils. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, thanks for coming out. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.